Hey everyone. So when I saw this monster rearing its three ugly heads in the Tears of the Kingdom trailer, I thought, hey, that's a Gleeok. And then I thought, I should make that. So today I'm going to be showing you how I made this Gleeok from the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. So I started by taking some screenshots from the game and tracing them out onto this paper to work out a blueprint for how big I wanted this model to be. It took me over 5 months to complete this model, so I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like on the video if you like the way it turned out. And you can see here I'm sizing up this tin can, which would end up being the core of the model. Then I started wrapping it in layers of tin foil to bulk up the body. Next I took 2 strands of this thick wire and twisted them together to form a strong base for the tail. Then I wrapped that in tin foil as well to bulk it up and could attach it to the body. Once the basic shape of the body was connected together, I could start adding a layer of clay to solidify it. And I did that by squishing out these thin sheets, then blending them together with my thumbs. And here's how it looks now it's all covered in clay. Next I started making the legs of the Gleeok. At this point, after looking at some more pictures of the Gleeok, I realised that the tail needed to be a lot thicker, so I rolled out these clay sausages and smoothed them onto the side to thicken it up. Next I started marking out the places where the tail spikes were going to go. And I measured out this guide so I could work out how big all of the tail spikes needed to be. And I spent about the next hour making a load of clay spikes of different sizes which I could match up to the guide. Here you can watch as I gradually fill up all the different sizes of spikes that I need. Then it was just a case of sticking them to the sides of the tail in size order, starting with the biggest and getting smaller towards the end of the tail. Even though this process might look quite fast and satisfying, it was actually quite tedious and time consuming. I also stuck on these much larger spikes which you can see flailing around at the end of the Gleeok's tail. After the tail was complete, I added on these lumps of clay and blended them in at the shoulders and hips where the legs would be attached. I bent these wires into the shape of the Gleeok's legs and pushed them into the body, and then started bulking them up with clay. And after I'd achieved that basic leg shape, I added a bit of muscular definition. Next it was on to making the 3 necks of the Gleeok. Now this was tricky because I wanted them to be hollow so that I could put LED strip lights inside. This was so that the Gleeok could glow from the inside out with the elemental colours like it does in the game. So to make them hollow, I rolled up a tin foil inside which I covered with clay and I could take out later. Here you can see me removing the front panel of clay, so I'm left with just the back and sides. And I repeated this process for all 3 of the necks. And here's how they look. Quite messy, but the important thing is that they're hollow. And you can also see I poked these holes in the back that the spikes would be put in later. Next I attached the 3 necks to the front of the body by squishing them onto lumps of clay which I blended in. Then I started to work on the underbelly of the Gleeok. I rolled out this long sausage of clay which I could cut into pieces and line up to texture his stomach. And I pressed these pieces together and slightly flattened them to get the look of the belly plates. And now it's back to making the necks of the Gleeok, and this is really the star of the video. It's Cernit translucent clay, which when it's baked lets some light pass through, which is what will allow the necks to glow later on. So after rolling this flat, I could press it onto the front of the necks and make a see-through panel which the light could then shine through. Then I pulled these out of the necks so that I could bake them and they'd become translucent, and then I could peel the tin foil off the back, which was quite satisfying. I didn't film much of this, but here are some of the pieces I made for the heads, including the top and the lower jaw, and then I could fit this translucent eyeball into them. And I could attach these head pieces to the ends of the necks. Here I'm adding a few more details which I forgot to add earlier, like the spiky spine which runs along the Gleeok's tail. Around this time I also worked on the Gleeok's feet by poking bent wires into his feet and adding clay onto them. I used the brush to manipulate these little pieces of clay so that they went around the wires and looked more like his toes. And here you can see me working on the wings, so I traced out this huge outline onto a few pieces of paper, and then I cut out different lengths of wire which would match up to the wing bones. Then I took the 2 largest bones which outlined the wings and attached them to the Gleeok and then covered them with clay. Once these big wing archways were done, I covered the other wires in clay and I could attach them too. This was so difficult because I was working against gravity to stick them on, but finally I got them all on there. And I added these little spikes to the tips of the bones. Finally I stuck these 2 small bones together with some clay and attached them to the top of the wings, and I had to use an interesting setup to get them to dry properly. Then going back to the necks, I covered the translucent clay with some normal clay and cut out these little window slits between the neck plates so that the light could shine through later. One of the final details I made were the back spikes or back crystals that kind of remind me of what's on Godzilla's back. I drew out a guide for these and then made big clay spikes and added smaller clay spikes to the sides. And speaking of Godzilla, and here's how they look in all their varying sizes. Now that all the individual pieces of the Gleeok were made, I could start working on the scale texture for the body. I rolled out these thin sheets of clay and stuck them all over the surface of the Gleeok, and then I used this scale texture roller that I'd made earlier to imprint the scale texture onto it. What you can see me doing here is pressing those spikes into the clay so that they have an indent which they can fit into later. Now these are the LED strips that I bought online. And here you can see me securing them to the inside of the necks, winding them round so they light up both the back and the front of the Gleeok. Once the LED strips were in place, I could stick on the front plates of the neck. And here you can see me bulking up the chest after the necks were put in place. Next, I moved on to adding the scale texture to all of the areas that the scale roller couldn't really reach. Then I started working on the wings, so I traced out the outline onto this old t-shirt and cut it out. I soaked the t-shirt fabric in watered down Mod Podge, then draped it over the wing bones. This would help to give it strength when it dried. And with that final piece in place, it was onto the painting. I started by painting the underside and the wings with a dark reddish brown. And once that base layer was achieved, I could add some depth and texture with a series of lighter dry brushes. I had to be careful when painting the necks to not get any brown paint on the clear pieces. And once all of the coral coloured elements were finished, I could start painting the back with the dark blue. I dry brush the scales with purples, greens, blues and pinks to give them an iridescent look. After a little manicure, I could move on to painting the tail spikes with a light brown. I also gave them a lighter dry brush to highlight their pointy tips. As one of the final finishing touches, I made a load of spikes out of the translucent clay which I could then stick to the back of the Gleeok's neck. I also made eye spikes and cheek wings or maybe ears and a crown of horns to put on top of each of the heads. I painted the insides of the mouths with the dark blue and added a forked tongue which I made off camera. And with those last few details, my Gleeok was finally done. So thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it if you made it all the way to the end, and I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. As always, be sure to let me know in the comments what you want to see me make next time, and make sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.